code and what mistakes and pain there can be.
Hey. Okay, so I was actually planning to hold this in German, but since we have many English speakers, I might as well just continue in English. If you can't bear with it, just tell me it's too broken and I will stop. Okay, so my name's Patrick. I'm sysadmin at Mayflower. I come from an operations and development background, so I've been doing some consulting work, seen both sides of operations and development, and bad cooperation as well. I've been starting to work with Puppet in 2009, and I'm in love with it since then, basically. Mayflower is a company that does mainly web application development. We're about 70 employees, mostly developers. We are a team of 3 sysadmins to run all the stuff we have in the company and some staging systems for customers. And we, of course, love open source. We mostly do PHP and JavaScript, but that's luckily none of my business. Yeah, so in Ops at Mayflower, we basically run all the corporate services. This means Confluence for the wiki, Jira for issue tracking, with Greenhopper for the agile development. We use Jabber for internal communications. We, of course, host all of our source code on Git. So we run our own GitLab instance and also host some stuff on GitHub. So we are responsible for the network, the voice over IP systems, and a few legacy systems running SUSE Linux, which I don't really like. We switched all the new systems to Ubuntu. We also run a few things as a service for our developers. So if they need virtual machines, Vagrant-based boxes, whatever, we help them with that. We've got a smallish OpenStack installation where people can actually try stuff at the moment. It's not really in production yet. Yeah, and well, it's basically our stack. We are using KVM everywhere, and a lot of virtualization and Vagrant in all the developer teams. Yeah, so I will just start with our infrastructure in Git. So we run basically all the systems from mail servers to CI machines, etc. Everything comes from Puppet. So we have a huge repository that is at 900 megabytes because I made a poor decision to put WAR files into the repository, which was a stupid idea. Yeah, I think we have about 4 or 5 contributors from the company. So we have some people that are actually into operations and also help us with stuff. Yeah, that makes up about 2,000 commits in a bit over a year, I think. Actually, I can't say it exactly because we actually forked the repository of another project. Yeah, that's 5,000 lines of manifest with 49 modules for about 50 to 60-ish nodes. It's a rather small deployment since most of them are internal systems and we don't run production systems for our customers. Because usually enterprise customers have their own operations group and they don't tend to use Puppet and do things on their own. So we basically have this workflow in operations. So you hack on some Puppet stuff, then you commit to the repository, push it up to our repo server, and then it runs through Jenkins. So you might be hacking for a while, doing various things, thinking everything is fine, and then Jenkins tells you, oh, your build is broken, because there's a trailing white space. Yeah, so you go on and fix the typo, the white space, or whatever, rage a bit, and commit and push again. So you might finally get a success message from Jenkins. which triggers the deployment run that pushes all the manifests and modules to our Puppet master. And yeah, then you start from the beginning and keep on hacking. So the problem about this is that everything is in production. So we mainly work on master, so it's basically mainline development. This makes refactoring and adding features like really painful because you're sitting there in the evening, maybe pushing 1 or 2 features to the Puppet repository, and then you think like, oh, I could go home, and then suddenly everything is on fire because you can easily break all the systems. These are partly things we didn't implement yet, so I will give some advice on people that are not using Puppet for as long as we do. So maybe, who's using Puppet for more than 6 months? Okay, not so many people. Less than 5 months? Okay. All right. Yeah, so basically the workflow should be like in any software project. You should actually work on named branches or topic branches, so you don't create collisions with your colleagues and have your new feature separated. And of course use pull requests to get review on the code done. What we are also going to do is using branches as environments. That's something I think many people do. Anyone around here doing this? Okay, 1 person, 2 persons, all right. Yeah, basically for the reason so you don't break all the systems at once and can choose which systems you want to run against your new feature branch. Yeah, so once you're pushing code into our repository, we are doing almost no testing. That's a bit bad for us. We really suck at testing. So all our Jenkins does is testing syntax and linting code for style and failing on some checks. So what we actually, or what we might do is using RSpec Puppet, because it's probably the best thing you can do right now. There's Puppet Cucumber from Nikolai Sturm, which is deprecated officially, mostly because he's doing Chef now. Yeah, the problem with RSpec is that it feels really redundant. So you write your manifest and you go off to writing an RSpec test, and it pretty much feels like you're writing down the same stuff all the time, just in a different syntax. So best advice on RSpec Puppet is to only test your first layer of abstraction. So if you're writing a module to maybe abstract engine X from some vendor module like the Puppet Labs module, only test your stuff that directly integrates with that, because you'll like do twice the effort in the end. Yeah, so since Jenkins is only running lint and validate, we have a lot of comments that say like, oh fuck, I did the wrong syntax, oh there's a semicolon missing, oh I forgot the parentheses and stuff. This happens a lot. So actually, you shouldn't do this in Jenkins. It's your job. So you should actually have a pre-commit hook in your repository locally. Yeah, which is a problem with Git because you can distribute them. So your local development setup should be easy to set up. Probably like running a single script that sets up all the pre-commit hooks and installs all the dependencies you need. So it's easier for new people to join and use your repository. Especially things like lint and validate are pretty easy, just like 2 command line calls. Yeah. Another thing in our workflow is modules, which we implemented as Git submodules. which is kind of madness. You see all the commands down there. That's basically if we are forking a module like Puppet Labs Nginx and working on it, we need to change the submodule in our super repo that holds the manifests. And then you go like, oh, let's remove the submodule, because if I don't remove the submodule, the next deployment will probably be bad, especially if I'm switching branches or anything, because Git submodules are very fragile. They tend to break a lot. So you usually have to remove the submodule, re-add the submodule, push that onto production, wait for it to deploy, as well as hacking on your module, pushing those commits can take quite some time. So luckily there is librarian Puppet by Tim Sharp from GitHub. It's basically like bundler for Ruby. It handles all your dependencies. For modules, you can install modules from the Forge as well as from Git if you have forked modules. It's pretty easy. You just call librarian Puppet install and we'll get all the modules in your Puppet file. That's what they call the configuration file. And it also pulls all the dependencies you need. As you can see here, you can also specify branches, which I'm a fan of since it's a real pain with Git submodules. Yeah, you could also use your own Forge, but I don't think there is any code to do that. Yeah. So when we've done all this, our deployment is like really easy. So we just lint and validate the file, see that everything is correct and won't break instantly when an agent connects. So we lint and validate this on Jenkins. Then Jenkins does an SSH call to our Puppet master. That again calls a FOSS command, a shell script that actually does git submodule sync, updates all the submodules, pulls some branches, yeah, and resolves conflicts by overriding them. Yeah, so we have this pretty simple deployment, so you don't get too far, so it's not too complicated. Then I'm going to talk a bit about Puppet in action and how we use it. So we have infrastructure as code basically, and this is just as hard as software design in my opinion. You can fuck up a lot initially in your repository. You can end up with like many manifests files, many classes, defined resources that gets like unmaintainable within a few weeks. So when setting up your Puppet environment, you should really think about how you're going to design it and whether you're going to write a module that will handle all your stuff. There actually was a nice blog post that I couldn't find while doing the slides that explains Puppet in terms of applications, profiles, and roles. So you actually have manifests that define your application or service you're going to deploy, all the configuration options, and then you build profiles on that for maybe a slave configuration or a master configuration. And then you actually have roles that are going to be applied to real machines. So you don't have to think of machines, but more like roles. Yeah, we ended up with like a lot of manifests that are almost 100 lines of code or more. I think I can actually show you one. Oh, yeah, maybe not. Can you see that? There's probably no password, yeah. So, oh wait, it's not properly. You see this over here? That's like a zoomed out view of a manifest. This is actually one of our routers in the office. The problem with that manifest is that we are building a lot of our code around well, let's call it data structure. So we have some hashes with options that we pass into a class. That creates like all the stuff we need. So this basically is all data. It's almost no real configuration except for stuff like that. So yeah, this is what you end up with. And now try to maintain something like that. Gets really painful. Damn, there's a password and another one, and another one. Yeah, that also is a problem. You should start using ENCs or Hira like at the beginning, so you don't have to rip out hard-coded credentials in your manifest later on. Yeah. So yeah, the local environment is something I've already talked about. It should be easy to set up and run for local testing and development, to keep the cowboys off production servers and breaking things where it wouldn't have been needed just because someone had to test like a 4-line change. And you should really handle your Puppet repository just like a software project. So for local testing, you can use things like Vagrant. Vagrant has actually great multi-VM support with networking and all the stuff. Problem is you can dynamically define nodes in Vagrant. So I'm actually hacking around that with these lucky lines of codes where I'm basically taking an environment variable that holds all the node names I'm going to need for my test run. Then I'm firing up a local master instance so I can, yeah, I'm not actually deploying, I'm just sharing the repository with my local master instance. And so I can fire up like random nodes and try new things, refactor some of the code without breaking production servers, since we don't have a staging environment for most services we are running. Especially with something like GitLab, you don't really need like a real staging environment because you're probably going to fire it up like once in 3 months to do an update or something. Yeah, so this is pretty hacky. You can also use stuff like OpenStack to do this. Just run a few instances in a local OpenStack machine that you have on your network, or run it even in EC2 to do the testing. This actually helps a lot. I think I'm missing a slide, okay. Yeah, so who in here is using exported resources? One person, two person, okay. Only a few. Okay, so I might explain what it is. So exported resources are basically, you can define a resource that isn't real on the machine you're defining it to. So you can create a resource, fill it with some parameters, and then create it on a different node, collect it on a different node. So what we are doing with this is stuff like the code you're seeing right now. We've built a module around Nginx that abstracts all the web server stuff we need for like PHP and all that stuff, and reverse proxies. So you can actually write the manifest that will abstract the service for you, like we do this with the web server. So we can actually say on our, for example, on our Jira machine, we can say, hey, I need a web server forward on the domain bugs.example.com. I'd like my front end to be, this is actually a host name of a machine, to be proxy.example.com, and the backend is my fqdn on port 8080. And I want us to do protocol SSL to the outside. So this actually goes off to create a web server vOS proxy resource. That is basically some options wrapped around normal Nginx vhosts. So this gets saved to your PuppetDB or store configs, depending on which version you are running on. Right, and then you can go off and collect this again on the proxy server. It's pretty simple. So this creates the actual Nginx configuration on the proxy server. So we have like a few machines that run services like Confluence, GitLab, and Jira, and various other stuff. And all of these manifests just say, hey, I need a web server forward in my local domain that matches to this host name. And yeah, you basically run the host, wait for the Puppet run on the proxy server, and there's your reverse proxy. We also use this for Isinga to generate monitoring configuration. So all of our hosts are coming out of provisioning with like checks for disk space, zombie processes, and load and stuff. Can show that as well. It's not the nicest manifest. So we have a bunch of, can't really see it from over here, of default checks, which are defined, I think, down here, right where we have common services. So we generate all of these resources on each node actually, and then have our monitoring machine just collect all the configurations for all the monitoring checks. So you don't have to write any configuration by yourself. And you can actually just put your checks into like the application profile for Jira if you have a specific check for Jira, and also override some checks. So I think, is it around here? No, it's not. Okay. Okay, so you can basically use this to glue a lot of things together. It's a bit hacky, so because you can't really, your ordering has to be working correctly, like you're expecting it, because you can't really do a require on an exported resource. You can't really check for them. I think there's ways with PuppetDB now, since there are some query functions, to actually look for resources in your store config database to see whether the resource is there or not. Otherwise, you would have to do some hacking with, is this resource defined or not? That doesn't really work out so well. Yeah, we also use this to like populate all public SSH keys to the backup machine, so we don't have any problems logging in there. We set up static DHCP configuration and DNS zones for every host based on this. And we also do this for some databases. So if you have a service that needs a database, you can just use the exported resource that will create databases on your database service. Right. Yeah, and then we have modules in Puppet, which is a bit of a sorry state because sometiime it's like you have to get the service up and running. So you're going on the net, looking at the Puppet Forge maybe for a module, then you'll go off to GitHub and search for a module there. Then maybe just try some mailing lists. Maybe someone has posted some code there. Maybe try to get a snippet of a gist. That's like really painful. Especially most of these modules are like the quality of the module is a real problem because there's like no guideline how you should write a module. So people just tend to come up with random code that looks like crap and probably isn't going to work for you because it's too specialized for the use case they had in mind. and you might have more effort trying to get the module working for you than writing your own. And there's also the problem of abandoned code. So there's like a lot of great modules on GitHub, but many people seem to write the module, maybe get on another job and just let the code die on GitHub. It even feels like that with some of the Puppet Labs modules. So you have like, I don't know, the M collective module has like n modules, and n-1 is adding stomp configuration support to the module, and like one pull request or something else. So you have like, I don't know, 10, 20 people doing the same just because someone is not merging a pull request. Yeah, that's not so nice. You can go off merge all the pull requests yourself, but then you're ending up with a repo that will die just as all the others. Yeah. But it got better. So like 6 months ago, there was like very few modules on the Forge. It was hard to find something, but it got much better. I think many people are starting to publish their modules actually, not just dropping the source code on GitHub without any documentation or stuff. So people are actually beginning to do stuff. Where there might also be a problem with writing modules. So if any of you is going to write modules and doesn't really know what style he should stick with and what to go for, the example 42 is their organization name, I think, on Mayflower, on GitHub. You can check their modules. They are like really great. They have integrated like all the stuff they have. Each of their modules supports configuration of firewalls. It supports configuration of various monitoring and backup tools. And they have some nice ideas about hooking into their modules. And as well as the Puppet Labs modules. So some of them are not as good as you might wish, but okay. Yeah. That's the great thing about these adapters. They seem to break all the time. Okay. Yeah, I think I just... I didn't crash it. Okay. Okay, so where was I? Right, writing modules. So yeah, for good examples, definitely check example 42. They're doing great work. And also definitely look at the Puppet Labs modules, since these are actually one of the few that actually do RSpec testing and testing at all. So if you need to get started with that, you might just look around at some of the code on GitHub. Okay, so I lost track of time. Quarter of an hour. Okay. Yeah, so I'm running a bit fast on this talk. I thought actually I'm going much slower with English, so I'm already into questions. Because I'd actually like to discuss a bit about what people experience, what was real pain and wasn't really documented, or they just didn't know any better, so it went all wrong. Or just ask me whatever you feel like.
if I'm new to Puppet, where should I start?
Okay, well, like I said, you should maybe start thinking about what you're going to need, what you're actually designing in manifests. So what does your infrastructure look like, and what parts can be put into roles, what are profiles, where's the actual difference in configuration between nodes? So if you're running a lot of the same service, there might be only small differences. You should probably start off with a module that abstracts all the stuff you need. Because we actually ended up with, like, I think we had 20 or 30 or 40 classes just lying around in our manifests folder that we are sometimes using, sometimes not, and it was really hard to keep track of what parts of the code are actually being used, which changes are in production. So even with configuration management, you can lose yourself. Yeah, and then start abstracting from there into basically all the roles you have and all the applications, and write proper classes around them. Yeah, and start testing right at the beginning, because you will have a lot of debt after like a few weeks or months that you need to refactor and fix, and it gets ugly pretty fast.
Hi. With regards to on your lots of servers, of course, there's lots of applications running. You said it's PHP or whatever. And my question is, are you involved in deployment there and upgrade process, and or is that how does it work?
Yeah, with some of the applications. So for our development teams, we're actually trying to work with the people on their deployment, which is a problem with some customers, because you have, like, I don't know, some old school operations group that thinks like SCP is the shit. So we actually try to, where we can. I definitely recommend any kind of packaging if you're using any proper Linux distribution, because it saves you a lot of time. And for example, if you're running Debian or Ubuntu, you can do like a lot of stuff with their onboard packaging system. So if you have databases, you can use their DB common framework that actually supports database migrations, creating databases, deleting them for you, and all that stuff. And you're doing all of this with your package manager. So you can even jump from whatever version you feel like to your actual version and build a proper migration path into DB common.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with you in the state of the modules for a long time. Haven't actually seen the current progress, review the current progress on Puppet Forge that much, but I think what is needed, and we had this discussion a few days before, is I think, as from my point of view, I think it's we need a common namespace, and sure, it is more work to develop a shareable module and to document it properly and to work on it collectively, and using a shared module and working on it collectively is more work than just rolling out your own. Yeah. Over time that will get better, hopefully, but I think there's no way around, and the starting point is starting point is Puppet Forge, I think. Introducing some kind of rating or whatever, but ultimately it should lead to, in my opinion, should lead to a shared namespace, so we don't have such and such dash Apache 2, but just an Apache 2 module, and everybody knows that it's this one we have to work on, we all have to work on, or build some other forge, you know.
Yeah.
And the second thing I think, which is probably even comes before that maybe, or goes parallel, is we need something like the style guide for a design guide or something for modules. This is
Definitely, yeah.
before we have these interfacing elements, for example, like whatever have you, like private classes, public classes, interfaces for modules or something programmatically. This is how you do it by design. How you design a module so that it is extensible. And third, maybe the infrastructure on Puppet Forge could provide for tests running on different architectures. I think I've heard that this being implemented or has been starting. So I think that we will see some improvement, but ultimately we all have to accept the fact that it'll take time for us, and we should work together on that and stay like be prepared to help.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, that's why I was pointing out to the example 42 and Puppet Labs modules, because I don't think there's like any real documentation on how to write a module. I mean, there's stuff like your directory structure should look like this, and there's Puppet module generate, but that doesn't really help you.
Also for the style discussions and also these, you said okay. There's example 42 has one example, and the nicest thing is he actually explains what the reasons behind certain decisions. As so does R.I. Pirna, for example, in his blog. Oftentimes he explains his reasoning behind it. But what a new user or what a Puppet developer is left with is several options to choose from. And for us, what really helped is that there was the style guide was prominently posted on the Puppet Labs wiki. It was referenced everywhere. It's now part of the documentation, of the official documentation. So that ended a lot of discussions, and that helped us to decide which style to follow. And I hope that with designs, it'll be similar. There are several good design approaches, but there needs to be one for everyone to follow, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so once again, publish your modules. So we can all rant about them and tell you why your code sucks. Anyone else?
Two questions. How do you start your Puppet runs, and how do you check for the result?
We are
monitoring.
Running Puppet in agent mode, so by default every 40 minutes. I think we have only like the monitoring system that runs maybe every hour because it has so many resources, and it takes like, yeah, I think about 5 minutes depending on the load just to compile the catalog. And we are using the Puppet XMPP report processor in addition to a check Puppet script in Nagios. So if a node is failing, we see it right in our Java user conference, and can just like look into it. Yeah, and Nagios basically checks, is the agent running, how old is the catalog on disk? That's all.
Further questions? No. So we have a 20-minute break, and we'll see you with Ken Barber's presentation on how to write a module.
Thanks.